There's more than one way to skin a cat, and just like that, there is more than one way to build muscle. But different types of muscle building will result in different types of muscle. And this is something a lot of people don't realise when they first get into their training, and sometimes even when they're quite a long way into their routine. Depending on your goals, you need to choose the right type of training to suit you. At the same time, depending on your metabolism, on your muscle fibre type, you need to also choose the right type of muscle training for you. And if you're like me, and you want to train for cross modalities and get as many different things in that basket as possible, then you need to mix these up into one big thing. So whether you're training for athletics, aesthetics, or athletic aesthetics, you need to know what the best way to achieve that is. And we're going to talk about that in this video, as you might have guessed. So stay tuned, and let's do that cartoon thing that I made again. Okay, so you might now be wondering what I was blabbering about in that highly well-spoken introduction. This is something people often ask me. They say, Adam, what are you speaking about? I'm going to tell you now. It is a bit of a complex subject, hence my blabbering, so perhaps the easiest way to demonstrate is to just show you an example of two different training modalities and then explain how they get different results. So on the one hand, you have lifting heavy weights for a smaller amount of repetitions. This is a weight that I can do a few times, so let's go. So what we're doing here, I could probably do a couple more repetitions, no more than 8, I'd say, maximum. So what we're doing there is we're engaging the fastest twitch muscle fibres. These are the fibres in the muscle that can create the most explosive power. They're the least energy efficient, but for pure power, they're the most useful. And so when you lift something very heavy, your body tries to engage as many of those fast twitch muscle fibres as possible. Now, compare this with doing a lighter weight, like so. Now, I'm using the slower twitch muscle fibres. The body will try and do the most efficient thing it can do in order to get you through your chosen task. So if you're moving a lot of weight, it will make you use the most explosive muscle fibres. But if it can get away with using the slow twitch muscle fibres, which are more energy efficient, then it will, and the fast twitch muscle fibres won't be involved. But there are more differences involved here than simply which type of muscle type fibre you're tearing. At the same time, when you lift a heavier weight, this requires a better neuromuscular connection. It requires better mind-muscle connection, as they sometimes call it. This means you need to recruit more muscle fibres, and that is partly due to how strong the connections are in your brain and in your nervous system. And that happens to be practice. They say that the average folk can only recruit about 30% of their muscle fibre when they're trying to lift a heavy weight. So they're leaving 70% of their maximum strength on the table. A trained athlete, on the other hand, can recruit about 50%. Why don't you just recruit 100% of your fast twitch muscle fibre? Because if you did that, you'd be fully exhausted, you wouldn't be able to use your fast twitch muscle fibre at all, and then if a predator came, you wouldn't be able to run away. There are some interesting studies that show that adrenaline can increase the amount of fast twitch muscle fibre you're capable of recruiting, and that's why you hear stories about women lifting cars off their trapped children and rock climbers pushing rocks off of their bodies. For the most part though, training with heavy weight will help you to improve your muscle fibre recruitment, as well as tearing the fast twitch muscle fibres. Tearing the muscles is what leads them to grow during rest, when your body uses the protein to build those muscle fibres thicker. Meanwhile, there's more going on with the lighter weight too. When we train with the lighter weight, then we're not only training the slower twitch muscle fibres, which by the way are the thinner type, meaning that they won't build as big and as thick. At the same time, they're also allowing you to do a higher number of repetitions, which means you're probably getting a little bit of cardio benefit, but moreover, it means you're creating metabolic stress. When you do this, you're effectively occluding the muscle. Blood now can't escape from the bicep, it's being sent there, and it's building up along with metabolites such as growth hormone and testosterone, and and it's increasing and depleting the glycogen stores in the muscle. Some people divide these two types of training into myofibrillar hypertrophy, hypertrophy being muscle growth, and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Myofibrillar means that you're tearing the muscle fibres, and that increases strength, raw strength. And meanwhile, sarcoplasmic means that you're building the muscles up with fluid, and that increases size. And that's what bodybuilders tend to do, whereas a powerlifter tends to focus more on myofibrillar. There is some debate as to whether or not these concepts are scientifically sound, but I think anyone who's worked out in the gym will tell you that lighter weight performed for higher repetitions will lead to greater muscle volume, muscle size, whereas heavier weight for fewer repetitions will increase your overall strength. And that's probably mainly due to the fast twitch muscle fibre tearing, but it's also due to the improved technique and the improved ability to recruit those muscle fibres. So on the one hand, you have your power lifters. Power lifters are people, they tend to use compound movements. These are big movements that involve multiple joints, like so, called a multi-joint exercise. So they're combining all of their different joints to work in unison, and this creates a bigger flood of growth hormone. They use very heavy weights, they train for a lower number of repetitions, they're interested in creating muscle tears, building the neuromuscular junction, and generally improving their overall strength. You can get very skinny powerlifters, and they're just so good because they have the perfect technique and they can recruit more muscle fibre. There's a guy called Dennis Rogers, he's a strongman, and he can recruit a huge amount of muscle fibre despite being a small guy. He seems to have a genetic advantage, and in doing this, he may be the world's strongest man pound for pound. Then on the other hand, you have your bodybuilders, and what they'll tend to do is just isolate a muscle group. Now they do compound exercises as well, but predominantly they focus on isolation exercises like the curl. And in doing this, the only muscle you're using is the bicep, if you're using correct form. This allows you to create the maximum number of micro tears in that specific muscle, while at the same time flooding it with the metabolites that will stimulate growth. Got to be even. And that will result in the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy that creates size and the aesthetics that bodybuilders are known for. Now a lot of people will say that's not functional, bodybuilders aren't functional, they've got this useless strength, it's fake muscle. That's nonsense and it's annoying, because what's wrong with endurance? Endurance lifting is a useful skill, and as you flood your muscles with more fluids, they become better at endurance tasks. Thus, a bodybuilder would be superior if he had to turn a heavy wheel for 2 hours, which admittedly is something you don't do regularly, but then to be honest, you don't regularly have to lift a 200 kilogram log off the floor either. So, you know, horses for courses. And that's where my next point comes in, because what if you're a horse who wants to run on all the courses? You're a multidisciplinary horse. In that case, you might want to try something like power building. Power building means that you're combining both types of training into one workout. So you might do the lighter weights for high repetitions, and you might do the heavier weights for fewer repetitions. You might do isolation and combine that with compound movements. And this is called power building because you're building the aesthetics and you're building the power that comes from power building. And this way as well, you're building endurance as well as raw explosive power. And this is very similar to what people are currently calling on the internet athletic aesthetics. That means training for performance and for size. But then this could also be related to even more interdisciplinary training, such as CrossFit, where you think of CrossFit, where you're combining things like powerlifts with also running and calisthenics and all this other stuff, street workouts. So you're combining all that different stuff into one regime. And it's up to you which bits you want to prioritise, whether you want to do all of it, whether you want to just focus on one bit. Nothing is wrong and nothing is right. We're all unique, and that's what makes the world nice or something, I don't know. But what I like to do is try and combine all these different types of training, not only because I'm interested in improving my overall performance, but also because I do believe it's the best way to stimulate growth. Because what you'll find is, depending on how much fast twitch muscle fibre you have, how much slow twitch muscle fibre you have, whether you're an ectomorph, an endomorph, whatever kind of growth hormone profile you have, hormone profile, this will affect which kind of training is best for you. Some people will find that as soon as they slow down their training to the max, that they then start to see massive growth. I've heard lots of people say that. In fact, I made a video on it. Slow down your training, then you might just see growth. Other people, on the other hand, will find that training faster is what they need to stimulate the most growth. Other people still might respond best to compound movements, other people respond best to isolation movements. And so before you start training, you don't know what's going to work for you. And I say, well, why not just do all of it then? Why not combine it all into one regime? That's what I like to do. And then there's all these other exciting types of training that I find really interesting. There's a lot of people say the best way to build strength, to create muscle damage, and therefore micro tears, is to have the weight on the negative portion of the movement and to apply pressure during a stretch. So like so, I would do an isometric hold, gradually let my muscles fail, let's speed that up a bit, and make sure that I go all the way to that stretch. And I must admit, when I'm doing bench press or something, if I widen my grip and feel that stretch, that often leads to the most DOMs the next day, delayed onset muscle soreness, and the most growth. Then you have things like static contraction or overbearing isometrics, overcoming isometrics. That's where you are pulling against an immovable force. So something Bruce Lee used to do. He used to just pull against a chain so it was attached to the floor, see how hard he could pull it, and what that would do is it would allow him to do the equivalent of training with way beyond his 1 rep max, because he's pulling as much as he can possibly pull. He's trying to recruit all that muscle fibre. The brain is sending out signals, acetylcholine, and therefore he's increasing his muscle fibre recruitment. And this is why Bruce Lee, despite being a relatively small guy, was as powerful as you could probably want to be, unless you want to be Goku, which I do. But yeah, so that works too. And then you've got all sorts of other things. Bruce Lee also used to do speed training, and speed training involves, as you can guess, just going through the workout as fast as possible. And this is interesting, because as far as the muscles are concerned, generating explosive power and force, doesn't matter whether that's due to resistance or that it's due to acceleration. Your body thinks that acceleration is the same thing as resistance. And there's way more, and I could go into it in detail, but I've already made this video rather long. The point is that to me the most exciting and interesting training is when you combine all these things into one awesome regime. And the way I do that is to build it around a drop set, because a drop set to me is already the perfect power building protocol, because what you're doing is you're starting with a very heavy weight, and this is recruiting maximum muscle fibre, creating maximum tears, and then you go into failure. You can't do any more repetitions. When you reach failure, you put down that weight and you immediately pick up the next one. And what happens then is that you've caught all the micro tears, you've fatigued those fast twitch muscle fibres, so when you go down a weight, you're now bringing in still the fast twitch muscle fibres that weren't fatigued by the last one. Like I say, you're using the most efficient combination of muscle fibres, so you're just fatiguing more, and you're starting to bring in more of your slow twitch muscle fibres. At the same time, because you've now done 2 sets back to back with no break in between, that's increasing your time under tension and the time allowed for your muscle to build up that blood and those metabolites. And a drop set allows you to keep on going through those motions. So then what I do is I just tack on my other types of training. So I might start with my overcoming isometrics or an isometric hold, then move on. This is too heavy, but for the purpose of an illustration, great technique there. Then move on to the next weight I can do, and then as soon as I can't do any more of that, move on to the next lighter one and keep going. And then you keep going and keep going. That's called running the rack. And then I might end with burns, or I might end with another isometric hold, or I might end with just contracting the muscles, or I might do a stretch at the end and just really stretch out the muscles as much as I can. By building this all into one giant set, you're including all types of training. And as one of the most key principles of bodybuilding states, said, is that right? Specific adaptations to imposed demands, that is right. As that tells you, your body will adapt to whatever kind of training you throw at it. If you throw all the kinds of training at it, then it will adapt to all of them. And as you know from my previous video, I also like to go running as well, which improves my cardio fitness, allows me to train harder, and increases my resting heart rate in between to stimulate more growth. So this is quite a long, rambling video. The point is that I'm trying to say there's lots of different types of training. The type that's best for you depends on your goals and it depends on your body. The best approach, I think, to get the best all-round body and to avoid disappointment is to combine them all into one mega routine, and that's what I do. And I'll be talking more about how to do that, and I'll show you some workouts that I do to do that on my channel later. But also, just keep researching lots of different things, don't be too wed to any one training regime, and yeah, keep experimenting and don't be afraid to combine lots of different things into one. So there you go. That's that, I guess. So yeah, in essence, train in lots of awesome different ways and it will be awesome. I hope you found that useful and interesting. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Please consider following me on Twitter and on Instagram, and I'll put my links to those things in the description below. Obviously check out the website, thebioneer.com, and stay tuned to this channel for lots more of this kind of thing and also lots of other kinds of things, because I'm going to be talking about lifestyle design, nootropics, and all sorts of ways to boost your body and your brain, because that's what I'm interested in, and hopefully you find it interesting too. So yes, stay tuned for that. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.